Hi, I'm Em,
And I'm Will.
and today we're going to be discussing the United States prison system and the subsequent reform that needs to be fulfilled.
Let's begin, starting with the history of prisons in America.
The modern American prison system really began taking shape in the 80s. During this time, prison populations surged because, well, it was the 80s. The prison system we currently have is majority of private prisons, also known as for-profit prisons, where the federal government does not own the prison, but still funds the facility, typically based on how many people are in the jail at the time. This resulted in the prison owners bribing officials to make harsher laws, longer sentences, and stricter police officers. From this, the rich got richer.
One prominent prison owner was Tom Beasley, co-founder of CCA. He made profit from buying and selling prisons. To quote him, "You just sell prisons like you were selling cars, or real estate, or hamburgers." Yikes!
As the population surge continued into the 90s, prison conditions worsened. Lawmakers made it even harder for people to win civil rights lawsuits, resulting in approximately 2.2 million people in the prison system as of 2020. These conditions simply continue to worsen.
The conditions in the prison system are atrocious. There is little to no attempt by lawmakers to help these prisoners, trickling down to the owners and guards. Prisoners are regularly beaten, raped, and killed. Guards often abuse their powers like this due to the owners ignoring their abuse, choosing to not give their guards repercussions for their actions. Many prisons remain willfully ignorant to the sexual abuse cases within their prisons, despite numerous complaints.
Now let's talk about child prisoners. Only recently has the government made an effort to give children convicted of violent crimes extra protections. Up until 2005, yes, 2005, children convicted of a violent crime could still receive the death penalty. And still, to this day, children as young as 8 years old can be put into adult prisons for being convicted of a violent crime, being forced to face those same conditions mentioned by Will. This, of course, affects children of color far more. An insane 70% of all kids 14 years of age and younger sentenced to death in prisons are children of color. All of this results in these kids being 9 times more likely to commit suicide than their counterparts in juvenile prisons.
In researching individual cases, so many were extremely cruel, I almost couldn't stomach it. I find myself getting angrier and angrier the more I learn. One case in particular that was very upsetting was Rocrast Mack. Some guards were conducting a routine check while Mack was resting on his bed. During the check, Officer Melissa Brown approached Mack and accused him of giving her an inappropriate look. Brown began shouting at Mack before she turned to beating him, pursuing him as he tried to hide behind his bed, pumping him with her fists and baton. When he struck out in self-defense before running, the majority of the other guards chased him down before beating Mack to death. This is just one case of the abuse faced in prisons, which is why we so desperately need reform.
Several things need to be reformed in the judicial and prison systems to help fix all of this. Currently, the resources to investigate and defend oneself are blocked from many people by financial constraints. Yes, the right to an attorney is one guaranteed to everyone, but a swamped public defender with 15 other cases is very different from the private defender paid millions to focus on one case alone. Many of those accused simply can't afford a better lawyer. This results in wrongful convictions, extensive sentencing, and even capital punishment in some cases. All because prisons mass incarcerate the impoverished and mentally ill, only resulting in more poverty. People leave these overcrowded, violent prisons more battered, traumatized, and mentally ill than when they arrived.
Today, nearly 10 million Americans, including millions of children, have an immediate family member in jail or in prison. More than 4.5 million Americans can't vote because of past conviction, and each year we lose $87 billion in GDP due to mass incarceration. Tough on crime policies from the federal government and other lawmakers only serve to perpetuate the belief that other people of color are inherently guilty and dangerous. This racist rhetoric still drives a majority of sentencing today, leading to mass incarceration of Black and brown Americans, creating a cycle of systematic abuse.
Meanwhile, current political rhetoric often compares prisons to hotels and resorts, when we all know that is far from the reality. In truth, the conditions that need to be fixed lead to immense overcrowding, substandard medical and mental care, and fail to prepare prisoners for a return to the outside world. For the past 30 years, federal courts have given prisoners the last recourse for their constitutional rights to safe conditions of confinement and freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. Their rights to even access courts are being limited, even now, making conditions even harsher and punitive for prisoners.
The system does nothing to treat prisoners. In all of my research, I saw nothing about them trying to actually help. Simply how they are failing to help prisoners reform. If you're talking about prisons reforming and getting better, you're dreaming. They want people in prison.
They do. As I mentioned towards the beginning, prisons being for-profit is one of the biggest factors in all of this. They want people in prison because those in charge of them get paid per prisoner they have incarcerated. The more people are forced into these horrible, overcrowded conditions, the more money to line their pockets and continue paying the lawmakers to keep up the status quo, or even make it worse.
This is where prison reform begins. We need to start by eliminating private prisons. Then, we can work on improving conditions and helping prisoners reform to become active members of society.
Yep. Well, that's all we have time for today. How are you feeling after that, Will?
Upset. How about you?
Angry, personally.
Sounds about right. With that, that's the Dow Siblings. Signing off. I'm Will.
And I'm Em. Hope you enjoyed it.
And that's all on prison reform.